This is the story of Pinocchio. You can read along with me in your book. You will know it's time to turn the page when you hear the chimes ring like this. Let's begin now. Have you ever wondered if wishes really do come true? Well, they do. And Jiminy Cricket has seen it happen. Here, let me tell you about it. One starry night, Jiminy Cricket's travels took him to a tiny shop owned by Geppetto, the woodcarver. He sneaked under the door and saw old Geppetto working on a puppet that looked like a little boy. Geppetto finished his little wooden-headed creation with one last dab of paint and decided to name him Pinocchio. Now all he had to do was to try him out. Geppetto took Pinocchio down off the workbench and danced the little puppet across the wooden floor by pulling the strings. Figaro, the cat, wasn't sure he liked the newcomer who clomped and clattered around the shop. But Geppetto liked his little Pinocchio very much. But wouldn't it be nice if Pinocchio were a real live boy? Oh well. Now it was time for bed, and so, saying goodnight to him, Geppetto put Pinocchio back on the workbench. Just before going to sleep, Geppetto looked out his window into the starry night and pointed out the wishing star to Figaro. Oh, the wishing star! And he made a wish that his little Pinocchio would become a real boy. And with that, Geppetto drifted happily off to sleep. Jiminy Cricket agreed that it was a very nice thought as he settled down to bed in an empty matchbox. But wishes like that never come true. Moments later, the room filled with light, and there stood a beautiful blue fairy. She tapped Pinocchio with her magic wand and magically gave the little puppet the gift of life. Pinocchio could move. He could talk. But how? Because tonight, Geppetto had wished for a real boy, she explained. But the blue fairy warned Pinocchio that he was not a real boy yet. First, he had to prove himself to be brave, truthful, and unselfish. And he had to learn to choose between right and wrong. But how would he know? Suddenly, up jumped Jiminy Cricket onto the workbench, saying that he would help him. So the fairy appointed him Pinocchio's conscience. And with that, she vanished. When Geppetto woke up and saw Pinocchio walking and talking, he was amazed. It was his wish come true. Oh, Pinocchio, his very own little boy. He was so happy. And Pinocchio was happy too, for he now had a father. And the two of them danced around the shop, laughing merrily. The next morning, Geppetto sent Pinocchio off to school. But there was trouble hiding along the way. A sly fox and a crafty cat convinced Pinocchio that the place for a puppet without strings was the theatre. And they steered him away from school and off to Stromboli, the puppet master. Stromboli put Pinocchio into his puppet show that very day. The audiences poured in to see the little puppet who could sing and dance completely without strings. Yes, Pinocchio was a big hit. However, Jiminy Cricket told him that he ought to have been in school, but he wouldn't listen. Besides, Pinocchio was making so much money that Jiminy figured he must be wrong. Little did he know. In Stromboli's wagon after the show, the greedy puppet master took all Pinocchio's money and then locked him in a cage which was to be the new home for his little wooden gold mine. Pinocchio shook the bars of his cage. No! He didn't want to be an actor. He wanted to go home. But Stromboli only laughed and slammed the wagon door. Jiminy Cricket found poor Pinocchio crying in the dark. He should have listened to Jiminy. Now he would never get home. Just then, the blue fairy reappeared. Pinocchio tried to cover up his predicament by lying, but with each lie, his wooden nose grew longer and longer. The fairy explained that a lie would keep growing until it was as plain as the nose on his face. She forgave Pinocchio this once, but that was the last time she could help him. She waved her wand, and in a twinkling, Pinocchio's nose was back to normal, and the cage door opened. As Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket headed for home, Pinocchio heard about a wonderful place called Pleasure Island, where boys were allowed to break windows, smoke cigars, and stay up late. It sounded fishy to Jiminy, but Pinocchio wanted to go. He climbed aboard a coach full of noisy, foolish boys. All Jiminy could do was tag along. At Pleasure Island, Pinocchio joined all those rowdy boys in wrecking furniture, throwing mud balls, and playing pool. Jiminy knew this place wasn't good, so he tried to talk Pinocchio into leaving. Look at him! How did he ever expect to be a real boy? But all Pinocchio could say was that you only live once. So Jiminy left him there to make a fool of himself. As he headed for the boat dock, Jiminy noticed some sinister men herding frightened little donkeys into crates. The strange part was that the donkeys were wearing boys' clothing, and some were crying for their mothers. Then it hit him. These were bad boys who had turned into donkeys. He had to get Pinocchio off Pleasure Island, and fast. He dashed back to the pool room, shouting at Pinocchio to get out of there, because the boys had all turned into donkeys. But he was too late. Pinocchio had already sprouted donkey's ears and a tail. Oh, what could he do now? Jiminy had to help him. They had to get away from there before Pinocchio got any worse. So with Pinocchio following Jiminy, they ran to the water's edge, dived into the sea, and swam for the mainland. Pinocchio pulled himself from the water, still wearing ears and a tail, but he was glad he had escaped Pleasure Island. Now he wanted to go home to see his father. When they arrived at Geppetto's workshop, the place was locked and Geppetto was gone. Just then, a magic dove flew by and dropped a note.